Well, I'm delighted and honored to be joined here in this new kind of interview series that we're so excited to be doing called Finding Your Light by an artist, composer, director, somebody that I've admired for a very, very long time. We have a little bit of a mutual connection that we'll talk about in a second, but goes without saying, Academy Award winner, composer, everything from Wild Robot, Bridgerton, and then as a co-director of one of my favorite documentaries that I've ever seen, The Last Repair Shop, of which I was lucky enough to go and visit. Kris Bowers, thank you for joining us on this. It's really, really an honor for me.
Thanks. Same here, Josh. Really appreciate it.
You're such a Swiss Army knife of talents and skills and inspirations, and you're using your abilities to really kind of create a narrative and shine a light on causes that are so important to you. When you started out, though, I mean, I'm always fascinated by the kind of the first moments. I talk on stage a lot about like that first choir teacher, that first moment that I had where I realized, like, oh, maybe I can do this. Um, when did you first discover your love of composing, or at least the moment where you said, maybe this is something that I am doing or could do?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty early. I'd say like around 8 or 9, I was put into jazz lessons. So my parents put me in piano lessons when I was 4, but it was Suzuki style lessons. And
You're right.
in around 8, they found a classical teacher for me to study with. And at that point, my interest started to wane a little bit. And my
And for
grandma,
those who don't know, the Suzuki is very like rigid, right? A lot. I've heard of a lot of people's interest waning when they start doing like the really rigid kind of scales, and I did some of that stuff too. And it's just, yeah, it can pull you away from it.
yeah, and I think the thing when you're a kid that makes you excited about playing an instrument is playing music that you've heard on the radio or expressing yourself. And so for me, this like rigid learning style was starting to make me feel less interested. And my grandmother actually suggested jazz lessons, and she saw a posting about this, guy that taught jazz not too far from where she lived. And that experience of learning how to improvise
Hmm.
directly led to me starting to compose, because all of a sudden I started to realize that I could express these little ideas or play around with these little riffs and create these pieces of music. And I feel like around maybe middle school, I had a teacher that named Mr. Delone at John Burroughs Middle School who
And
was
John
really,
Burroughs.
yeah, yeah.
I played little league soccer there, and
Oh, wait.
grew up right down the street from John Burroughs. Yeah,
Oh, man.
that's
Oh, yeah.
awesome.
I went to Third Street Elementary and then John Burroughs. Yeah.
Incredible. I love it.
But yeah, that he was the first teacher that pointed out that I had something that was worth nurturing. I remember I wanted to play saxophone in the band because I thought it might be interesting to try something new. Again, I think I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And he heard me playing piano one day, and I hadn't even told him I was a pianist. And he basically was like, "Don't bring the saxophone to school. You're a pianist." But at the same time, he was very excited about someone in his class that seemed to be very interested in it. And so, he would bring me in during lunch and we'd play together, and he'd teach me other songs that he wasn't teaching the rest of the band. And he brought in people like Lou Rawls and Al Jarreau
Oh
to our
wow.
school. And,
Oh my
and
God.
yes, I think that was when I started to
You had Lou Rawls and Al Jarreau at John Burroughs?
Rose. Yeah, we did like a concert with him. It
Wow.
was crazy. Yeah.
I would have dropped my little league mitt and I would have just like run right into the class. Oh man. I mean, that's a great teacher. I shout out the teacher that did that for me, Richard Barrett. It's like when you have a teacher that knows that there is something there, and all you need to do is like put a Kris or a Josh in the room or in the space or introduce them to that one song or that one instrument or that one artist. It can change everything. How does it feel now to be in a position where you can pay it forward, pay it back, and you look at those students, for instance, in Last Repair Shop, and you see that light bulb going off in a way that was perhaps the very same that happened for you. It must feel amazing to be in a position now where you can provide that platform and that privilege and that access to so many other kids now.
Yeah, I mean, it feels amazing. It feels necessary for me. I
Yep.
think that, like, for me, I recognize how much, like my parents did a lot to put me in spaces. Like we didn't. I was the only person interested in the arts in on my block or in my neighborhood, and even in a lot of ways in my family. Like I had an older cousin that was a rapper, and an older uncle that was a singer, but we didn't have that much interaction. And so I was pretty isolated in my interest in being an artist, but my parents found these communities for me to be in. And being in those spaces, there were always these people whether it was a Mr. Delone or any other teacher or these other organizations that had little competitions or any of that kind of stuff, that made me feel validated in this love of mine, or this developing
Mm,
passion of mine.
mm.
And then so many mentors that were very generous with their time, generous with information, and all of that. I think it's never lost on me that those are the reasons why I'm even here today. And so it feels
Yeah,
necessary for me to continue to do that. And like you said, to be in a position where I can provide those platforms of those experiences. Like I think about when we did the end credits of The Last Repair Shop, and we had these young students playing with these veterans in the music industry on the scoring stage at Warner Brothers. And to see Portia at the time, who was I think maybe like 11 years old, lighting up, being in this crazy recording studio, and all the
yeah.
other students, I think it just made me feel very excited that hopefully, even if they don't become musicians, that hopefully this is something that made them feel like this passion that they have is worth validating and nurturing.
That's something that we really always talk about too, is that if somebody winds up becoming a Kris Bowers, that's almost a bonus. That like the thing that it did for you and the thing that it did for me and the thing when we watch that happening, both with the work you do and work we're loving to do, um, we're noticing a light bulb going off that's like a foundation, core memory,
Mhm.
well-rounded human light bulb that like if that person decides to go off and continue playing that instrument, wonderful. My favorite people that come up to me are the ones that are in totally different fields that still tell me about that music teacher or tell me about that orchestra they got to play in. And that was the moment they realized they could, share their voice, whatever that voice was.
Yeah, exactly.
So you went from John Burroughs and having that experience to a school that we both went to, Loxa, which is the LA County School for the Arts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a transformative moment for me because I'd never had really kind of all in extensive arts training. I had some classes at my other schools, but that was a moment. What grade did you start at Loxa?
Ninth grade. What about you?
For me, I started 11th grade, so I was a little bit later, and
Where,
it was a great way to finish up high school because it was everything I could have wanted.
where were you before that?
I went to Windward. I was at Windward, which was a very very rigid academic school, but they also had I loved the theater teacher there. That's where the choir teacher, Mr. Barrett, that's where he, gave me my first solo and I had some wonderful experiences there. But I had like, issues with my grades. Like I didn't realize at the time that I had like ADD and I had these other things that I was dealing with. And there was, there were two things happening at that school, which is that from the arts side of it, I was just totally flying and loving it. And from the academic side of it, there was like very little patience for catch up. And so I wound up going to a place called Bridges Academy that was almost like private tutorial and that but had no arts, but just got my grades like figured out how to absorb information. And then Loxa was where I finished up. Did you find at Loxa that was like all those points of light at your other school programs and your parents and things like that? Did Loxa, do you have any memories of things at Loxa that kind of took you to that next level?
Yeah, 100%. It's funny because I went to Loxa for piano, but um, my plan was to switch to visual arts
Oh,
after
really?
year. Yeah, I wanted to be a cartoonist, and so I was drawing a lot, and I didn't have a portfolio that felt like it was strong enough to get in for visual art. And so my plan was to just work on my portfolio during my freshman year and switch at the end of the year. But that
Wow.
freshman year, I think it was the first time, as you well know, where I was surrounded by kids that were just as passionate about the arts or about their craft and about music as I was. And
Yeah.
I remember being around, the other freshmen in the jazz department, and also the seniors in the jazz department, and how incredible they were. I had a teacher, Jason Goldman, that was really great at
Yeah.
explaining the process of improvisation in a way. And I remember starting that year playing a simple standard and feeling frightened to stop playing the chords because I would lose my spot in the piece where I remember playing with the older students, and one of the students came over and he was like, you don't have to play every single chord. You can kind of like take breaks. And I was like, no, I have to play every single chord or else I'm gonna be lost. And to go from that to like by the end of my freshman year feeling pretty confident playing a
Mm.
standard and improvising.
And
And that's
finding your
also,
way back.
yeah, and finding my way back and
Yeah.
like being able to take a break. And
Yeah.
that freshman year is also where I had my core memory is being angry or sad or having these emotions as a at the time 12-year-old at the beginning of my freshman year,
Yeah.
and not having a place, or didn't feel like I had a place to express those things. And I remember a vivid moment of being angry with my parents and
Mm,
not being able to tell them that, and deciding to play piano from that angry headspace.
mm,
And then 30 minutes later, I wasn't as angry. And that's when I was like, actually, I kind of need this thing to process these emotions. And so by
yes.
the end of my freshman year, I was like, I'm a pianist. Like, this is what I need to do to kind of, experience my own emotional self.
And you had an instrument in the house where you like, did you have a piano growing up that you could go home and you could, I always say on stage, like how lucky I was that I had an instrument in the house. And I always tell parents that are in the audience, like, if you think you've got a kid that needs to exercise those demons and they're like gravitating towards an instrument, if you can do it, great. All the more reason why we need those programs, that give them access to that outlet, because it's an emotional outlet. I was an angsty kid too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like it's. I mean, we go through so much when we're, in that middle school,
Yeah,
early.
we should be angsty. I always say, like, you don't want to peak in middle school. That's a time period where you need to be going through stuff. And if you never went through anything in middle school, like, God bless you. I don't really want to be friends with you today, but
Yeah,
that's good for you. But
yeah,
yeah, the rest of us needed that.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, I had a piano, and I also would say, like, in terms of parents that are thinking about buying something for their kids, like my piano that I had from the time I was like 8 until 15, I think, was this like old out of tune like piano. I think my parents bought for like $300.
Yeah.
The keys were falling off, and I remember feeling like I needed a better instrument to be able to express myself in a clearer
Mm,
way, or in a better way. And I had a lesson with Mulgrew Miller, this incredible jazz pianist, and he came to my house and played on this $300 piano and made it sound like this
man.
concert grand Steinway. And it
Yeah.
was a moment where I was like, oh, it's actually you know possible to make this instrument sound really great. It's about, continuing to hone my craft. And so I feel like even if it's a cheap instrument, you can still express yourself with it.
When we were at the evening for the last repair shop at the LAUSD instrument repair, uh, going to this, I guess it was a gala, or it was a kind of a
Yes.
gathering to
Yeah.
support. Yo-Yo Ma played on one of the instruments that was repaired there, and it was a fascinating thing because it wasn't a bad instrument by any means, but it wasn't his $1 million
I know,
cello,
yeah, exactly.
and um, but in his hands it sang. It
Mm.
really sang, and I've always I've always found that to be an interesting thing that and for young people too, if they're picking up an instrument that is out of tune or it needs fixing or repairing, that what comes from within and the finesse with how you play it and how you express yourself on it can change the whole dynamic of what it is that's in your hands.
Yeah.
And I think that's so fun that you had somebody come over and play it for you, like, oh, that's possible. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
How quickly did you realize, as you were doing all this improvisation, that what you were actually doing was composing?
I think pretty early, because I was composing at the same time, but I think the strongest connection between the two came in high school as well. We had a master class with Terrence Blanchard,
Oh wow.
and he gave us an exercise where we had to um, consider taking a phrase, and like one short little phrase, and develop an entire solo out of that one phrase, where we'd be playing, and anytime we deviated from that phrase, he would stop us and point out the fact that we
Mm,
deviated from that
mm,
phrase. Or if he felt we had, he would stop us and we'd have to prove why we hadn't deviated from that phrase. If we could prove it, then that was the point of the exercise. But he also talked about using that in composition, and that whenever he
mm,
composes, he'll start with like a 6 note melody, and then try his best to make everything from this 10-minute composition come from
mm.
those 6 notes.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's where it began.
To create that sandbox for a student to say you got to work within this realm, is always really important. Yeah, it's the great thing about improvisation. I think it's wonderful, that tightrope when you're talking about. I couldn't find my way back. I think that every kid should learn some form of improvisation, just
Mm,
to understand what it feels like to let go of the rope and then have to hang back onto it, whether it's in theater. My thing was improv comedy. Like I couldn't wait to join the improv comedy group because I love the idea of not knowing like what the funny thing was going to be next, and then when you find
mm,
it, you feel like you're flying. And same thing goes for kids in making music or picking up a paintbrush without a stencil. Um, that's when you build your muscle for creative thought and independent thought. And do you find that your composition process today is any more formulated or rigid, or do you still find that it still stems from that style of play and letting go of the rope?
Yeah, it definitely starts there still, no matter what it is. Like my process, whether it's on The Wild Robot or Bridgerton or working with, you know, somebody outside of the film space, I will start with the emotion, and, the story elicits some sort of visceral emotion from me. And I try to find what that is, whether it's, with Wild Robot, it was the idea of becoming a parent. Like I just become a
Yeah.
parent. So that was very easy and top of surface. For Bridgerton season one, it was this couple that was trying to figure out how to work through their personal triggers and traumas to create a sustainable relationship. And I had just
Mm,
gotten married, and had many conversations about that with my wife. And so, finding those things that I have some sort of personal connection with, but because then I can mine some even deeper emotions from that. And then I go to the piano and I improvise to basically try to re-trigger the emotions that were
mm,
catalyzed by that idea.
mm,
It's like I watch a scene and I feel something
mm.
involuntarily, so I go to the piano and try to find something that re-triggers that feeling. And then once
Wow.
I do, I shape it, and that's where it's slightly changed, where now the way I shape it might be a little bit different because I've just learned more, but I think that that core part of the process is still the same as when it was
That's your letting go of the rope. You're basically trying to recall emotions, and you're kind of leapfrogging from one recall to another, and you're playing until you find it. I think that's so beautiful. It's mining for the good stuff.
Yeah. Well, do you still have a lot of the same processes you had when you were younger that still exist to this day?
Yeah, but as you start to have like a bar that keeps getting raised, and as you start kind of having more expectations put on you, or you've achieved certain things, you're always having to remind yourself of that childlike kind of scary letting go and how you find it. I think that sometimes the pressure and the cynicism of the business, and depending on who it is that is asking for something, and the collaborative nature of what you have to do, all of a sudden, when people go from not looking to very much looking and waiting, having the wherewithal to kind of like go back to that, shutting out the noise and chasing those feelings,
Hmm.
is kind of where it's at. And for me too, like sometimes I don't know if this is the case for you. I've never won any awards for anything that I've written, but like, you know, do you ever find do you ever find yourself like coming up with a melody idea in a not ideal space, like on an airplane or in the bathroom or the shower? Like for me, a lot of the times the stuff that hits me that winds up making its way to the stage one day is always in a place and I'm walking through traffic. It's not when I'm supposed to be doing the homework.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it makes sense though, right? It's like when our mind is like doing something else, that those things kind of come up from the subconscious. Like I had another teacher that was pivotal for me is, I don't know if you know Gerald Clayton. Like I don't know if he
Oh
was there.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
Gerald was my teacher my freshman year, and he had just graduated from Loxa. But he was the first person to tell me to sing while I'm playing, where he
Mm,
basically said that like when I'm improvising, if I sing, I can't help but play something that's natural instead of, I think at the time I was caught in playing like regurgitating riffs that I had learned and all of that. And so still to this day, like my process is I'll sit at the piano and write something or come up with something, but then I'll go, on a walk with my family, or like just kind of go about the rest of my day. And randomly I'll try to recall that melody. And most of the time I'll sing it, if I can remember it, I'll usually sing it slightly differently because the way that it's coming out of me singing wise when I'm not using the muscle memory of the piano
hmm
just feels a little bit different. And so oftentimes I actually find what the melody is going to be when I'm away
mm,
from the piano and I'm doing something else, and I'm like, putting my daughter to bed or something like
mm,
that. And so
hmm
trying to figure out how to like keep that is always a fun challenge.
Hanging on to that. Yeah, I know. Paul Simon used to say, you're going to get ideas at 2 in the morning. And the greatest advice I could ever give to any writer is get out of bed and put it down. Do not try to remember it when you wake up. It'll be gone. When
Yeah.
the muse hits you and something wacky hits you at a time and place that's not ideal, a lot of the effort of writing is just like getting out of bed or putting a towel on after the shower and just saying, all right, I'm getting this down. I got to get it down.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, well, I mean, I could talk to you about your craft all day long because I'm fascinated by your what you do, and I'm a big fan. I guess I would just leave with a question about the greats that I've always been able to talk to in my life. I think have been eternal students. They've no matter what kind of legend they have and mythology they have around them. Whenever I've been able to have a one-on-one with them and an intimate moment with them, there's always been kind of a still a yearning to continue to grow and to learn and to have a certain kind of healthy fear still to kind of keep you on your toes. You have now just conquered so many worlds and you're now in that echelon of greats. What's something that scares you and makes you feel like a student today?
Everything. I mean, outside of life stuff, which I think is always
Yeah,
totally.
yeah. Within, let's say within the artistic realm.
I
Yeah,
think
life is insane. Yeah.
um, one, I tend to choose my projects based on the idea of them challenging me in a new way. Like what scares me is actually choosing a project that calls for the same thing that I did for the last one. I think that
Mm,
makes me feel nervous in a way that I try to avoid. I actually like
mm,
the fear of, right now I'm working on a documentary that is based in Ghana, and so I've been doing like a lot of studying conversations with, Ghanaian teachers and musicians to understand that culture and that music as much as I can to write from that place. Or, I'm working on another project that is calling for a style of music I don't usually find myself writing very often, and so trying to do as much study with that. And even within the stuff that I've done before, I'm constantly trying to every cue that I write, I'm usually pulling up a handful of scores to study to look at how somebody else handled something or how a certain sound was achieved. And then on the filmmaking side, especially because that's something that is relatively new for me, there's a lot of studying there. Like I spend most of my time when I'm not working, reading books, and most of those books that I'm reading are about either like storytelling or psychology or
mm.
different things like that to try to understand story on a deeper level. My wife is annoyed whenever we watch something because I'm usually like studying the way it's shot, or like I'm pausing it to like see where we're at in the story and like taking
Oh
notes and
man.
things like that. But I agree that I feel like every person I've talked to that I've admired has reinforced that idea that they're just continuing to study and they're voracious learners, and they find this way to create parallels between things you wouldn't think of. Like, I remember talking to uh, an athlete about how he would look at like, you know uh, nature videos to see how he could move differently, or like, I just feel like studying whatever feels interesting is something I try to find time to do.
I think that's amazing and noble. And also note to self, like, don't watch a movie with Kris Bowers if you want to just like
Usually
get
watch
to the end.
it.
My brother's a filmmaker too, and he's like his biggest pet peeve is if I even so much as whisper to him, like, "How do you think this was shot?" So he's a little bit different there. Um, can you give us just like one quick final thought on just what the arts has meant to you away from the piano and what it's brought to your life outside of the job of it and the music making of it?
Yeah, I definitely think the connection to people. I've found so much community through music, and I've always been a very introverted person, but I'm very
Same.
excited to connect with people. And I feel like music is such a great way to do that, and to be able to do that like around the world and all that stuff. Like, my parents didn't even have a passport until they came to travel with me somewhere. So I feel like,
Wow.
I came from an environment where like the idea of traveling the world doing your job is something that feels pretty wild to me. But I'd say that those aspects of connection and, access or experience, and listening, I think that the thing I love about jazz and why I really fell in love with it was that at its peak it's people that are really really deeply listening to one another
Mm.
and finding a way to communicate in the moment. And it's not about who's talking the loudest. It's about like, active listening. And I try to bring that into my personal life in a way that I think has been very helpful in just making real genuine connections with people.
Connections and listening and not trying to just be the loudest person in the room, I think is something we all need in the world more than ever before. Thank you for being such an incredible connector. I'm such an enormous fan of your work, but also just the human being that you are. And Just
Same.
grateful to have been able to cross paths with you and to be able to share the same mission with you. And grateful for your time today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Thank you for everything you do, and thanks for all you do at Find Your Light as well. And yeah, you're an inspiration. I
We
appreciate it.
love it. We love it. Let's grab a coffee sometime.
Yeah, would love to.
When we're both getting a little more sleep, we'll
Yeah,
we'll earn the caffeine.
yeah, fair enough.